The views and opinions expressed on this program are those of the guests appearing on the program and do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of 8 News Now or Nexstar Media Group.
I think they're scared, they're concerned, they feel under assault. You see the rise of cancel culture.
Tonight on Politics Now, the Senate race heats up. Republican Adam Laxalt enters the race and the Democratic machine starts moving. Chaos in Kabul, the efforts to get Americans and Afghan refugees out, and the push to help those who helped the United States in the last 20 years of war. Plus,
without it, we really have nothing.
Shortage on the Colorado River. After an historic declaration, we are going to break down what cuts mean for Lake Mead and where water from the shrinking river is really going.
From 8 News Now, this is Politics Now.
Thank you very much for joining us here on Politics Now. I'm John Langler. The field is being set now for the 2022 Senate race here in Nevada. Former Attorney General Adam Laxalt is now officially a candidate. He launched his campaign this week with a culture war heavy ad.
In our house and at our church, we talk a lot about what's right and what's wrong. And right now, it seems like the wrong side is winning. The radical left, rich elites, woke corporations, academia, Hollywood, and the media, they're taking over America. That's your empire, right there, telling lie after lie.
So again, that is a political ad from the Laxalt campaign. The ad did not talk about Nevada specifically. Laxalt has the support of the national Republican establishment, though. Incumbent Democrat Catherine Cortez Masto was the first Latina elected to the Senate here from Nevada in 2016. Laxalt, meanwhile, is an ally of former President Trump. He lost his bid for governor to Steve Sisolak in 2018. The I-Team's David Charnes caught up with Laxalt this week to ask about the race.
The Senate, who knows what the composition is going to be, but Minority Leader Mitch McConnell voted for infrastructure. So sort of going against it is going against a lot of the party. Republicans supported this. I think, 17, 19 Republicans supported this. So what about it don't you like, besides the cost?
Look, I'm running to be an independent voice for Nevada. I'm running to be someone that's actually just going to stand up consistently for them. And right now, Masto just stands with her party 99% of the time. She votes with Chuck Schumer. And so, okay, if Mitch McConnell supported this one, I still don't support it. And I'll make those judgment calls each time for what I think is right. And like I said, let's be very clear, I would have been pushing to get a more narrow bill, a bill that only included bridges and roads and tunnels, what people really believe are infrastructure. This bill was a Christmas list of lots of other liberal wish lists from Washington, and unfortunately, we can't afford it.
What is it that she hasn't done that you feel, hey, I'd do a better job?
I'd flip the question on you. What has she done? I challenge you, get out in the street. I'm talking to your listeners right now. What has she done for Nevada? And not just 5 years as a senator, 8 years as an attorney general, 13 years. What are the things that come to your mind that she's done for Nevada? And I promise you, I speak to people every day. People can't think of anything. Because she hasn't done anything for Nevada. Certainly as an attorney general, there's no signature thing that she did. And we had to go in and clean up her mess that she left in the attorney general's office. And it's something that I anticipate we're going to have to do. If I win this Senate race, we're going to have to go in there and start delivering results for our state.
Should we accept Afghan refugees?
There are thousands of detainees at the Bagram prison that were released and that are out. And we have an open border that Senator Masto is refusing to fight to secure, and our country is most certainly less safe today than it was 1 week ago with that release. And so that is a big priority and something that we need answers to. What are we going to do about these thousands of really bad folks that have been released into the international terrorist network?
Back in November, you held a press conference that there was tons of election fraud. Those claims were thrown out of state court, federal court. Members of your own party said there was no fraud. The Secretary of State released a report and found 24 cases of potential fraud that were forwarded to your former office. the AG's office. Was this election fraudulent?
I have said from the beginning, and I maintain today, that mail-in balloting was not ready for prime time. It was not going to be a safe means of election for our state. We had never done it before, and it takes states years and years and years to get that right. Putting mail-in balloting, which the Democrats did with no Republican votes, 3 months out before election was not wise, and it was not something that was ever going to give voters confidence. And so I focused on mail-in signature verification from beginning to end. And I still maintain that mail-in balloting was not secure. In fact, I don't know that anybody argues that there was not fraud in mail-in balloting. The question is, to what degree? And the answer is, we still don't know.
Laxalt was the campaign chair for President Donald Trump and said he would welcome his endorsement. For more of David's interview with Mr. Laxalt, you can head to 8newsnow.com. Now, other Republicans in the Senate race include former Miss Nevada Sherelle Mendenhall and Wounded Warrior Sam Brown. You can see our interview with Miss Mendenhall on 8newsnow.com as well. We plan to speak with Mr. Brown on Politics Now very soon. Democratic groups quickly gathered to denounce Laxalt's announcement, and that included the bosses of several labor unions. Their first focus, Laxalt's opposition to that infrastructure bill.
Who in their right mind would take a stand against putting Nevadans to work, putting food on their tables, and keeping a roof over their children's head? I'll tell you who. Adam Laxalt and his main political benefactor, the former President Trump.
The Nevada AFL-CIO, carpenters, electrical workers, and other unions were all at that press conference earlier this week promoting the infrastructure bill. Democratic campaigns, including Ms. Cortez Masto's re-election campaign, they're being run through a new political arm for the state called Nevada Democratic Victory. Also this week, Clark County District Attorney Steve Wolfson announced his re-election campaign. Wolfson was first appointed to the position back in 2012. In his campaign launch, he touted diversion programs and a unit that reviews inmate claims of innocence. Mr. Wolfson's drawn criticism from fellow Democrats for his support of the death penalty. Former state lawmaker and prominent Las Vegas defense attorney Ozzie Fumo tells 8 News Now he will run against Wolfson. Fumo is an opponent of the death penalty. Also this week, Nevada Republican Party Chairman Michael McDonald was appointed to the RNC's 2024 Presidential Nominating Process Committee. McDonald is also on the Presidential Debate Committee. The first federal water shortage along the Colorado River is now in effect. Today, Lake Mead is at its lowest point ever, 1,067 feet. Federal water managers believe the level will keep on dropping, sparking this declaration. So this is tier 1 of these cutbacks. That means Nevada, Arizona, and Mexico will all have the maximum amount they can take out of the river cut back. The hardest hit with the first round of these cuts will be Arizona.
Farmers in the 3 central counties in Arizona, Pima County, Maricopa County, and Pinal County, will be losing substantial portions of their surface water. They will be able to pump some amount of groundwater under our 1980 Groundwater Management Act. I mentioned we also have one tribe and a couple of cities who will lose a small, very small amount of their water.
So let's break this down. Let's talk about what this means for us here in Nevada. Nevada is allowed 300,000 acre-feet of Colorado River water every year. But we only actually use about 2/3 of that, or so, about 235,000 acre-feet per year. Even though our allotment could go down to 279,000 acre-feet, we're still short of that maximum. In fact, we could go through the next 4 tiers of cutbacks, and that would still only drop us to about 270,000 acre-feet, which is still more than we actually use right now. In a normal year, 7.5 million acre-feet of Colorado River water is allocated to 7 states and, again, Mexico. Nevada's share is less than 2%. The biggest users are California and Colorado. For example, Imperial Valley, California uses 10 times what we do.
The Imperial Irrigation District is the single largest user on the entire Colorado River Basin. We're in the southeastern corner of California. Our use is primarily agricultural. Both the nice juicy steak and the fluffy salad you have during the year, that is most likely from the Imperial Valley or surrounding region here. And so we're at the tail end of the system here, almost on the border with Mexico. And so to us, the Colorado River is 100% of where our water comes from, and without it, we really have nothing.
Well, Las Vegas is so good at conserving water, we're trying to get everyone else to follow our lead. The Southern Nevada Water Authority is helping California set up its own water recycling program. This week, a ruling in an immigration case by a federal judge in Nevada could have some national repercussions. Judge Miranda Dew ruled a federal law about illegal re-entry into the U.S. is unconstitutional, and it may be the first federal ruling of its kind. Judge Dew says it has racist origins and disproportionately impacts Latinx people. The case centered on a man that was not a U.S. citizen who was originally deported in 1999. In 2019, he was arrested again for being a, quote, deported alien found in the United States. Well, that crime makes up 30% of all federal criminal charges back in 2019. The DOJ has not indicated if it will appeal just yet. Next on Politics Now, chaos in Afghanistan. We'll have a look at the efforts to try and get Americans out as the war ends and the Taliban takes back control. And a recap of the California gubernatorial recall debate coming up on Politics.
Welcome back to Politics Now.
In Afghanistan, the Pentagon now says it has evacuated 14,000 people from Kabul in the past week. That is much lower than the goal initially of evacuating 7,000 people a day. But President Joe Biden says they would evacuate every American who wants to go home. The military will. Nevada Senator Catherine Cortez Masto has joined a call for more special immigrant visas for Afghan translators who helped the military in the last 20 years of war. Republican Congressman Rob Whitman says it's important to help those who helped us.
There are so many SIV applications, special immigrant visa applications, that the State Department's just overwhelmed. We encourage everyone that is there in Afghanistan trying to get out to pursue both of those processes in unison.
And all week long, our Washington, D.C. correspondent Kelly Meyer. Kelly, let's just get right into things. What's been the reaction on Capitol Hill to the unfolding developments overseas?
Well, hey, there are a lot of criticism for President Biden on this withdrawal. We knew that this was coming. We knew that he set this goal to have all troops out of the region by the end of August, by the anniversary of September 11th, the 20th anniversary. But as we saw in the past week, this takeover from the Taliban in these areas, eventually reading Kabul, and now this, swift evacuation or attempt to evacuate Americans and Afghan allies that helped the U.S. military along the way in the past 20 years, facing a lot of questions. The administration is right now from a lot of lawmakers, both Democrat and Republican here on Capitol Hill, some who agreed with the decision to withdraw, others who did not agree or are just criticizing the way that the administration went about it. They're saying it's not that he made the decision to leave, it's how they're going about this withdrawal and how they are apparently that they say they weren't set up to bring these amount of troops home, get people out in time before the Taliban took over.
Well, Kelly, that's the political, I guess, discussion on Capitol Hill, the Republicans, the Democrats, the White House having their own finger-pointing match. But there's the human cost as well. Not only the Americans who are there, the troops, the defense contractors, etc., but the refugees. How many refugees might end up or will eventually end up here in the U.S., and where do things stand with the effort to get them from Afghanistan over back into the U.S.?
Well, that's just the thing, and that's a good question because we just don't know the numbers. I was just inside the Pentagon briefing this week, and, they couldn't really answer the amount of American citizens or Afghan allies that have been brought home. They said it was, 7,000 this week, but they couldn't break down the numbers of who that 7,000 number of evacuees were. Were they Americans? Were they Afghan allies? Were they refugees? Who's getting out? What applications still need to be processed for some of these visas for those translators that help the U.S. Some of them are still in process. Some are being moved to other regions or being brought to the U.S. So there's a lot of unanswered questions with this somewhat swift takeover, as some would say, of the Taliban of this region, and how the U.S. is reacting to making sure that Americans get out. We really haven't had a definitive answer from the Pentagon on whether this date will be extended, that August 31st date. The president said this week that they want to make sure that all Americans are out, and they won't leave until all Americans are out. But the Pentagon did say, Pentagon Press Secretary John Kirby did say that that would require an additional conversation with the Taliban if they decide to stay beyond August 31st.
And that was Kelly Meyer from our Washington, D.C. bureau. Governor Steve Sisolak's office says it is committed to accepting refugees and immigrant visa holders from Afghanistan. Switching gears, fiery moments in California as a recall election draws near. This week, the second debate among those hoping to replace Governor Gavin Newsom took place. Conservative talk show host Larry Elder leads the polls, but he skipped out. He was criticized by San Diego Mayor Kevin Faulconer for comments saying women, quoting here, women don't know as much as men, and that it's okay to discriminate against pregnant women in the workplace. Another weird debate moment as candidate John Cox was served comments during his opening remarks. The recall election in California is September 14th. Next on Politics Now, redrawing Nevada's congressional districts.
It really sets up the balance of power in terms of those 4 seats, who gets which seats.
We speak with the UNLV professor to break down what will happen with redistricting this summer and what Republicans and Democrats are hoping to get out of it.
You're watching Politics Now.
Welcome back. The 2020 census numbers are in, and soon Nevada lawmakers are going to hold a special session to redraw the lines of congressional districts. So here is what the map looks like right now for the congressional districts here in Nevada. And the idea is to get an equal number of people in each district based on the census. So you can see here, for example, the population deviation from ideal. This mark here is Congresswoman Susie Lee's district, and this is Congresswoman Titus. As you can see the difference there in the populations. The bottom line is redistricting will sort of even those numbers out. Every 10 years the census and the legislature sort out the boundaries of the congressional legislative districts to try and make sure it's even and fair. But it's just like a bill. Both houses have to pass it, then the governor signs it. We spoke with UNLV political science assistant Professor Dan Lee about this process.
How much is Nevada going to change from an electoral process, from a government process, from a representative process 10 years on? How different does Nevada look right now?
So I think in terms of representation, the big question in terms of redistricting is, out of the 4 seats, how many are going to be represented by Democrats versus Republicans, right? Because on the one hand, you look at Nevada, we're a swing state. You know, the statewide elections are all pretty competitive. It's close to a 50-50 split, also just looking at party registration of voters. So you might expect, well, if it's 50-50, then Democrats should get 2, Republicans should get 2. That seems like the most fair option, or most fair outcome, right? But this is where, you know, people start talking about gerrymandering and, you know, kind of the dirty side of redistricting. Because Democrats are, you know, they currently have a 3-to-1 advantage, and they're going to try to shore up that advantage. So they're going to try to redraw the districts that probably makes the 3rd district, for instance, a little bit safer for Susie Lee. Republican in the state legislature, they're going to fight against that redistricting plan, right? And they're going to try to keep it closer to a 2-to-2 split, right? Or at least keep it where some of these districts, such as the 3rd district, are still in play for Republicans.
How do you envision, or just based on what we have so right now, how will the districts be redrawn? What's that battle going to be like?
One way we can think about this is just an analogy where we need to make a jigsaw puzzle out of Nevada, right? That's essentially what redistricting is. We have the picture of Nevada, and we're just trying to cut it up into some jigsaw pieces. So we got to cut it up into 4 pieces, right? So there are constraints, right? It's not where Democrats and Republicans can just do whatever they want, right? So for instance, you know, each jigsaw piece is 1 congressional district. So you can't have like 2 separate jigsaw pieces being represented by 1 representative, by 1 person, right? So they have to be contiguous. Another thing is they have to be compact. They can't be too big and sprawly and weird shaped. Although we do see weird shaped districts, that's like one of the constraints, right? And you need to respect communities of interest. So by that, you don't really want to split up counties or cities. Like where you can, you try to keep people that have a similar economic and political interest together in the same congressional district, right? So with those constraints, we can kind of see, look ahead of, what's going to happen in this next round of redistricting, where a lot of it's going to look the same.
It's just shading enough to secure what is already in place versus gaining anything. I don't think there's any expectation by the Democrats of trying to take Mark Amodei.
Right, exactly. Right, because again, there are constraints, right? Again, there's limits to what the jigsaw pieces can look like. So again, that's going to leave the northern, Amodei's seat, relatively safe for him, right? And yes, the Democrats currently again have a 3-to-1 advantage, right? 3 House seats to 1 to Amodei's. But I think that what the Democrats are going to try to do is try to make the 3rd and 4th districts a bit more safe, right? The 3rd district, again, Heck controlled that, held that seat for a while. And Horsford lost re-election back in 2014, right? So those are districts that could swing either way. So that's the big thing that Democrats are going to try to do is, yes, they have a 3-to-1 advantage. Let's try to make it a safer advantage. Right? And the way of doing that is siphoning off, moving voters from Titus's 1st district, which is heavily Democratic, because she has votes to spare, and moving some of those voters into Susie Lee's district or Horsford district.
Changing the name of McCarran Airport is going to be expensive, a couple of $1 million. So money's being raised to turn it into Harry Reid International Airport. And this week, the fundraising got a very big boost. Former sports gambler, business owner, and one-time convicted felon Billy Walters kicked in $1 million to the cause. He says it's because the former senator is an outspoken advocate of Opportunity Village, where Walters' son gets OV services. Walters was pardoned in January by former President Donald Trump after being convicted for insider trading, the airport name change being paid for by private donors. That'll do it for Politics Now. We'll see you next week. For more details, 8newsnow.com. Take care.